And as you know, we have been studying some of the issues of our English Bible. We will be getting back to that when we have our video equipment up and running at Mary's return. She is away on more or less a business vacation conference type deal out west, again suffering for the Lord at Lake Tahoe. But she will be back and we'll finish that. And then we've been studying the kingdom offer. And we've had questions with regard to that, to how could God offer Israel the kingdom in Acts chapters 2 and 3, when there is so much prophecy that's to be fulfilled from that point, or so much that's predicted from that point to happen to Israel. Sometimes it's been hard to get in our minds that God can cancel certain prophecies. God can render them null and void. He can just simply say, on the basis of this, I will do this. And so that's what we're going to be investigating here. Omniscience and foreknowledge, and the fact that there are some prophecies that cannot be voided, and yet there are other prophecies that can be canceled based on the intelligent decisions of God's creatures. Now, what we're going to do is start off again with some word nuances. And at first you'll think, what in the world does this have to do with this particular study? But you will begin to see that understanding words and how they fit in the context of the Bible and how they fit in history is very, very important. I had a conversation with Miss Betty Hartley here, and she is in the designing trade. She is has lived her life and had her business along the lines of being an architect, and she used the word facade. And she said, well, it's the principal face or the front of a building. And of course, that's true. But the word facade has three nuances that we're going to investigate here. And you have to understand that when it's used in context, and she was using the facade, meaning the front of the building. And here we've been involved with putting a front on the building. And so in my mind, it was in the gear of a builder. And that is, it's the artificial face or front of a building. And then we'll deal with that of being a theologian here in just a little bit. And that's the third way that the word can be used. But right now, we're going to look at a part in the Bible, place in the Bible, where the first nuance is used, and we will understand it that way, okay? So we're in Genesis chapter 6. And we're going to draw the side of Noah's Ark here. This is just one side. Verse number 14 of Genesis chapter 6. And so God said to Noah, make thee an ark of gopher wood. Now, when you're looking then at the side that I have placed here of Noah's Ark, the front of it has a substance, and that is wood, or specifically gopher wood. That is its face or its facade. That's one way of understanding the word. Before there was anything else that had to do with the ark, there was a facade on it. And we understand the facade as a face. And when you looked at that ark, there wasn't anything else on that ark but wood. So you keep in mind, that's how the word or the concept of facade is given in the Bible. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. But that's not the only way that it's used. The second way is, it is the artificial face or front of a building. Now this is fresh in my mind, because for months now, we have seen church after church after church after church. And you know something? I have never seen a church as yet in all the ones we have looked at. Now, I have seen it at other times. But I've never seen a church as yet where I saw the first nuance, that is the facade. But I have seen its facade. What do I mean by that? Well, it's either had siding on it, or it's had paint on it, or it's had Drive-It on it. That's an up-and-coming substance that people are using. And that too is a facade. And let's look in verse number 14. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. That's the nuance one. And the last part of the verse says, pitch it within and without with pitch. Now you've got a facade upon a facade. But they're two different things. Well, here we go over here. And this, of course, is wood. But now we have pitch or tar or a sealant that's on there. And we'll just put another front to it. So that you cannot see its facade, you can only see its facade. Now, I'm being facetious about facade, but you understand I'm trying to drive home a point. Just because a word is used in one specific instance, it's not always that way. Sometimes it can be translated or understood that way, depending on the context. But it's not always true, especially in the Scriptures. When we're coming to understanding omniscience, when we're coming to understand foreknowledge, when we're going to come to understand a prediction that is non-cancelable, or one that can be canceled, you have to understand there's a difference. Just like there's a difference between facade and facade, there is a difference between omniscience and foreknowledge and predictions. And we'll get to that in just a little bit here. All right? So now if you'll turn with me to 2 Corinthians, we're going to look at the third way a facade is used. And coming up from the Baptist ranks as I was a younger man and attempted to be a fiery evangelist, I used the word facade a lot because it means simply a front. You've used this term. Well, they're just putting up a front. You know, there's something beneath the surface that we can't see or necessarily detect on the surface. And so as a theologian or as a counselor or what have you, people have facades. You've had them. I've had them. And it means a deceitful face or front of a person. Now we're here in 2 Corinthians 11. Look at verse number 13. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. Now, it's that duality, if you will. It's a duplicity. They pretend to be one thing, and yet in actuality they are another. And the pretending, the appearance, is the facade. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers. For no marvel, says verse 14, Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, it's no great things if his ministers are transformed into the ministers of righteousness. So we look here and we have, I'll just put the letter, well, we'll just spell it out. It's not a long word. Face 1. That's the real face. That's how things are in actuality. That's the truth beneath the surface. But then, and you saw the happy and sad face, those come from the Greek theater, as one particular person would play 2 or 3 separate parts. You know, in those days, it was B budgets. You know, they didn't have a whole lot of money, so they got one actor, and he could be himself, and then he could put up a face, and he could be a man, and he could speak with a squeaky voice, and he could be a woman, and on, and so it just depended on the face that he put up. And that's what they'd have, little mask with a handle, and he'd just put this up. And that came to be called hypocrisy, or the face in front of the face, or face 2. So here is Satan, Lucifer. This is the way he really is, an angel of darkness, but he puts on another facade, another face, and he becomes an angel of light. He pretends to be. Now, let's go back here to Matthew chapter 23. Matthew chapter 23. And the concept of the Greek is the face beneath the face, or the facade in front of the facade. And it says in verse number 25, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, for ye make clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but within you're full of extortion and excess." You see, the outside, here it is, it's clean. It's, just so sparkling, dazzling, pure. But the inside was something else, dirty, filthy, corrupt. They pretended to be one thing with phase 2, but in reality, phase 1 this is what they really were. Verse number 28, and speaking along these lines, "Even so ye also outwardly appear righteous to men, but within you're full of hypocrisy and iniquity." So, each time, and we like to major on English. You know, Vanna White in Wheel of Fortune says in her testimony, "Letters are my life." Well, I can say this: words and concepts are mine, and they are not the same in every case. They can be, but oftentimes you have to understand them in this light. So, facade has 3 nuances. It can be the principal face of a building, that is the building, the structure itself, without it being completed outside. It can be the artificial face, the paint job. I remember one time, several weeks back, I said we're going to be a very deceitful church, but it's deceitful in the right way. We're going to put cosmetically a coat of paint or whatever on this building so that it won't look whatever. It's not going to look like the Crystal Cathedral, but it'll look the best we can make it. And so facade in that way is okay. But, number 3, a facade which is hiding something, a deceitful face or front, is always wrong. So we'll keep this in mind. And then as we go to the next, if you will, please turn to the book of Job, chapter 1. Job chapter 1. So the second word we need to understand is the word experiment. Now, experiment has more than 2 nuances, but these are the 2 pertinent ones to our study. If you're going to experiment with something in the first sense of the word, you're trying to discover an unknown truth. So here's a guy who is now trying to make water, all right? And he knows all the molecular tables and what's required here, there, and the other. And he said, I wonder if I add this to this, what I will get. Now, mind you, this is the guy who first did it. This is not God. He knew how to do it from the beginning. But this is the guy discovering how to make water. And so he finally experiments with all these things, and he comes up with this formula. He makes a discovery because of his experimentation. And that's what experiments do. They want to discover something that is an unknown truth. So he puts 2 molecules of hydrogen with 1 of oxygen, and guess what? Voila! Eureka! I've discovered it! Water! Now, on the other hand, then, the word experiment is to demonstrate a known truth. Now, here we go to Biology 101, and we're up in our city high schools here, or maybe not, whatever. We're up in our in school, and we're in science class, biology, what have you, and we want to do an experiment. Oh, discover an unknown truth? No. We want to demonstrate what we already know. And that means somebody else has already done experimentation in the first sense, but we need to have an experiment in the second sense to prove that what they discovered will always be true no matter when you do it. And by the way, when water was first created from here on out, what is water composed of? H2O. It was true back then. It was true in the Middle Ages. It is true now. And so the first guy, he discovered this truth, and anybody else who does this simply demonstrates that that is true. It's what is known, it's what we have uncovered, and we can mark it down. This will always be true. Now, if you add a little something to scotch and water, then you've changed the formula. That's different. But if you want pure water, it's H2O. But now, let's translate that over into life, and that's what we want. What is God doing? On the one hand, He, though we believe He knows, we believe He is also experimenting. What do you mean, Pastor? How can that be? God knows and all that. Yes, that's true. Eternally, as we will find out, His omniscience knows the beginning from the ending. However, God doesn't always relate eternally. He also relates temporally, or He relates in time. And that makes a difference. When He relates in time, He experiments. Number one, to see or discover an unknown truth. And we're going to use the test case of Job. Is this going to be true of Job? We'll see. Now, God says, yeah, I believe it is. That's His testimony regarding Job. But is Job going to have to be experimented on in order to discover what he is on the inside? And the answer to that is yes, he is. He is going to have to go through a test. Now, there's going to be a second test. Okay, says Lucifer, that's fine, we discovered this, but is this going to be true all the time? And God says, all right, let's have a second test to demonstrate a known truth. Job is faithful. So let's go and see test 1. We're in Job chapter 1. Verse 1, his name was Job. He was perfect and upright, feared God, eschewed evil. His substance was great. He had a family, verse number 4. We're going to just sift through this. But verse 6 says, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves, and Satan was among them. And the Lord said, where have you been? Going up and down, to and fro on the earth. Have you considered, verse 8, my servant Job? Now, these are test case conditions. By the way, why should you and I be interested in this? Do you know you're being experimented on? That's exactly the very same thing Job is going through, you're going through. And the very experimentation. Will you pass the test? Or will you fail? And then, will you always pass the test? Let's look. There's not a man like him on the earth, says God, perfect and upright, one that fears God and eschews evil. Satan says that Job fears God for, does Job fear God for naught? It's because you've got a hedge about him. Remove the hedge. Take away his wealth, take away his children, and the like, and he will curse you, verse number 11, to your face. And so God said, okay, that's fine, do it. So what happened when he lost his family, lost his houses, lost his servants, lost his cattle? Come down to verse number 20. Job arose, rent his mantle, shaved his beard, fell down upon the ground. These are ancient customs or expressions of mourning, loss, grieving. And said, naked came I out of my mother's womb, naked I shall return thither. As the Lord gave, the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Experiment 1, E1. Did Job pass or fail? He passed. But question, was it up in the air as to what Job would do while he was going through the testing? Yes, that's the whole point. You can't discover an unknown truth unless you put him to the litmus test, the acid test, to see what he's made of. And that's what this is all about. And again, we contend God knew, but God does not always relate, as I said, to the eternal. He must relate to the temporal. And so, in the temporal, he must have experimentations where there is a question mark. Is he going to do it? or will he not do it? And that's what testing is. Okay, now let's look over here. Here is experiment 2. Will he always do it? Verse number 1 of chapter 2. And again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves for the Lord. Satan again came. He asked them the same question. Verse number 3, have you considered Job? And I want you to note, God more or less, this is not sinful, but it's just a gracious reminder of Job did this. You were the one in charge of the test. I took my hands off. There was no hedge about him. You just weren't allowed to kill him. You could take everything that he had external to himself. And note what he said. He fears God and eschews evil, last part of verse 3, and he still holds fast his integrity, although you moved me against him to destroy him without a cause. You wanted me to experiment with Job, and I allowed you to do experiment 1. Okay, now, Lucifer's going to ask for experiment 2. All right, maybe this was a fluke. Maybe he just passed, and we're not sure if it's going to be the same in every case. So, Satan answered again. Skin for skin, all that a man has will he give for his life. Put forth your hand and touch his bone and flesh, and he'll curse you. And so you go through the whole thing where he was smitten here and quite miserable. And you come on down to verse number 10. He rebuked his wife. You speak as one of the foolish women. Have you been around me so long? Are you a heathen? That's foolish, he says. What? Shall we receive good from the hand of God and shall not receive evil? He understood the angelic conflict. Now, he couldn't see behind the scenes, but he understood enough that he was being put through the ringer for God and God's glory. In all this, it says, experiment 2, did not Job sin with his lips? So, did he pass? And the answer to that is absolutely. Nuance 1, God discovered an unknown truth. Now, even though God might have known it as he relates temporally, and especially as he relates to his creatures, he has got to allow discovery. He has got to, as it were, play ignorant, allow this to go through as it sequentially relates in time. We're going to start this test, and we're going to see how you come out on the other side. And so there's a question. What is the unknown truth? Job, will he continue to fear God after God takes away his wealth? Answer, yes. All right, now, experiment 2. To demonstrate a known truth, Job is faithful. Will he continue to be faithful now that you take away his health? You've already taken away his wealth, now that you take away his health. Answer to that question, yes. Now, God demonstrated the answer to a question that was up for grabs, one way or the other. Let's see what it is, even though God is omniscient and he foreknows things. All right, let's move on to the next. All right, let's go to Psalms 33. Psalms 33. And we'll note here verse 11 in just a second. We're going to get 2 definitions here. Omniscience and foreknowledge. Though foreknowledge is included in omniscience, it is not necessarily the same. Omniscience means that God knows all that is everlastingly knowable, whether actual or possible, whether the general or the specific. But when you go through eternity, there's a whole lot of things that you got to filter through. And so God filters through this with what's called foreknowledge. And foreknowledge is he understands the temporal specifics of each individual case. That means he knows your circumstances and he knows my circumstances both ahead of time and after the fact. But this matter of foreknowledge, as you're coming up ahead of time, there is a question, just like with Job. And God pleads ignorant. Let's see what will happen given these circumstances. And so God, through his foreknowledge, knows possible options or actual options that are given to you. And he does not act until after you act, just like with Job. He allows Satan to do what he will. He gave him a period of time. Satan took away all of both his health and his wealth. And in both cases, God then says, all right, enough's enough. And he allowed Job then to be free from these infirmities and the like. The same thing with the Lord Jesus Christ on the cross. On the cross, for 6 and especially the 3 hours from noon to 3 o'clock, God the Father poured out on him the sins of the world. Now, was that going to go on indefinitely? No. But it was a test to see, will Jesus Christ stop the judgment and say, enough is enough, I'm dying for these people? Or will he come through 3 hours of the most excruciating punishment a person has ever gone through until he says, it is what? Finished. He passed the test. But up until that time, could he have stopped? Yes, we believe he could have, if he had wanted to. He could have come down from the cross. We could have all gone to hell. He could have lived in comfort in heaven and had him, his Mai Tai on the beach and just kicked back and forgot the rest of us. But he didn't. He passed the test. Did God know he was going to pass the test? That was his testimony. This is my son whom I'm well pleased. I know his sterling character. However, that's not good enough when you're dealing with creatures who don't have omniscience. That's not good enough when you have creatures that are temporal and sequential. You've got to put people through the test and allow them to demonstrate and allow others to discover, that's the word experiment, what it is. All right, so let's go to Psalms 33 and just quickly go down through 5 main components of omniscience. 1, omniscience is eternal. Psalms 33:11. The counsel of the Lord standeth forever. He knows what he's doing. Nobody's going to catch him off guard. The thoughts of his heart to all generation. And so when you look at something like this, you understand that forever means forever, and that God is not taken by surprise, and it is an eternal knowledge of all things actual and possible, general and specific. Isaiah 46. Isaiah 46. And verse number 10. Declaring the end from the beginning, from the ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, the Lord my counsel shall stand, I will do all my pleasure. Now, look at the last part of verse number 11. We'll be back to these verses. I have spoken it, I'll bring it to pass, I've purposed it, I will also do it. These are one category of predictions that are independent of creature choices. All right? But right here, we're not looking at that. We're looking at the fact that he knows the end from the beginning. And so B is the beginning, and here is the ending, and it knows everything in between, and that's what omniscience is, as it's related to eternity. And that's the point. Omniscience is eternal. That's why. But again, if you're talking about foreknowledge is temporal. And it means as you're looking forward, you know what's possible. And then as you know backwards, you know what's actual, what actually a creature did at a point in time. But let me ask you this. Before you were saved, and here you were, unsaved, even though he knew, looking back, you would be saved, during this time period here, did he treat you differently than any other sinner on the face of the earth? You're right. He did not. If you had died before this point of your faith, would you have gone straight to hell? Yes, you would have. That's foreknowledge. He knows the possible, and you have been given the option to believe or disbelieve, just like anybody else. Foreknowledge, in the one sense, has to wait or bide its time. Foreknowledge, in this sense, knows only the options. It does not know the conclusion. It does not know the conclusion until the experiment is done. And at a point in time, somebody said, will you believe or will you disbelieve? And you know what you did in your life? I know what I did. I believed on the Lord Jesus Christ. And at that point, foreknowledge now is in another category. It knows, as it knew, what I would do. But it could not treat me any differently on this side of the fence to that point. Because all that foreknowledge knew, as far as anybody else was concerned, is that I was given options in common with anybody else. There's something that I hold that's not in common with most of the worldly people, and that is I believed on the Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, now we'll get back to that. The second thing is, foreknowledge is perfect. Let's go to 1 John. Or not foreknowledge, omniscience. 1 John. I've got to watch my time here. Chapter 3. It says, if our heart condemn us, God's greater than our heart, and knows all things. He doesn't just know some things. He knows all things. You can't make the statement that he knows the beginning from the end unless he were to know all things. But again, that's omniscience as it relates to the eternal. It is not foreknowledge as it relates sequentially in time to the temporal. Because there are some things that God waits to demonstrate based on creature volition, one way or the other. And so, once that creature makes the decision, then the future is changed and altered. When I trusted Christ, my future was changed. My destiny was changed. It was altered. If I had not trusted Christ as my Savior, then my destiny would have gone on, as is predicted, to go to hell. All right? Let's go to Acts 15. Acts 15. This will be our last verse before the break here. Point number 3. God's omniscience is complete. Verse number 18. Known unto God are all his works. He knows all things, but he also knows what he's going to do. It's complete. Known are all his works from the beginning of the world. He's never going to be late. He's always going to be on time. He always knows what he's doing. He's always going to work all things together for good to them that love him. He's always going to work all things together for bad simultaneously for those who hate him. And he's going to do so perfectly, in perfect compatibility, so that none of his righteous essence is violated. He will always be just in doing this. But that's the story of the omniscience of God.